I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers Saturday, June 7th, 2025. Where we are in the narrative, we're really still just getting started. Today, we will leave Baxter State Park about 3 days after arriving, venturing into the 100-mile wilderness. It's our third day on trail, and we're about to start putting miles behind us. The haiku today is from February 22nd, 2026. To hold on to dreams, one has to remain asleep. To live them, wake up. And our new hiking term for today would be that of a section hike. So I mentioned before how a through hiker is somebody who completes the trail in one calendar year. A section hiker is then somebody who completes the trail by piecing it together over multiple years. And on occasion on trail, we'd actually come across the term mither, multi-year through hiker. And that essentially is the same thing, a section hiker. And with that, on to this entry. June 7th, 2025. Into the 100-mile wilderness. Start, Katahdin Stream Campground, Maine. End, Herd Brook Lean-To, Maine. Miles, 13.4. This entry will shortly go into describing the great day that Haley and I had on trail. Before I do, however, I want to share that the body of the 28-year-old woman was found on Wednesday. Her death and that of her father was an unfortunate tragedy, and I want to give this proper respect before moving on to the next part of our adventure. Today, we left Baxter State Park and entered into the 100-mile wilderness. Most of our hike today was in the park, getting to the southern border. We left camp around 9 and got to the edge of the park around 3. For the most part, it was a pretty easy hike. There were some parts with some obstacles, roots and rocks and such, but nothing like the other day when we climbed Katahdin. A highlight is that we forded 2 streams, which was fun. On the first, we thought we'd try to rock hop, but the rocks were too slippery and not well spaced, so we turned around, changed our shoes, and made our way across, water getting to about thigh high. The second was similar, except we went straight to fording. The views were once again beautiful. There are so many amazing lakes, ponds, and streams. Just outside the park, there is a store where we were hoping to get some subs, but it's early in the season and the sub shop isn't open yet. So our late lunch ended up being cookies and Pringles, followed by ice cream. The ice cream was very good. Nicely, we were also able to charge our phones there, so we entered the wilderness near 100% battery and haven't even had to plug into our power banks yet. From the store, we had 3.5 miles to the shelter where we finished the night. Rather than set up tent and hammock, we elected to stay in the shelter tonight. There is one other hiker in the shelter, but another 4 tenting nearby, including Dan and Michaela, who we met back at the hostel, who also ascended Katahdin on Thursday and took a 0 yesterday. That makes 3 others we met for the first time as we rolled into the shelter around 6:30. We also talked to a hiker outside the store for a while after we were done eating, but still waiting for our phones. It's been fun meeting people and talking about all the different sorts of hikes they are doing. All right, we're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsors who help keep Muse's AT Podcast on the trail. These are offerings that truly enhanced my through hike experience, so I'd really like you to check them out. Please look for and follow the links in the show notes to this episode. Looking forward to that lazy day on the couch, knocking down your Netflix queue and wondering what to wear? Quick answer, wear something else. Summit Ready Apparel is clothing built for those who scramble over jagged rocks, reach the peaks, and actually enjoy getting caught in a torrential downpour. If you're someone who doesn't mind the elements and has the grit to crush the next segment anyway, look no further than Summit Ready to match your restless trail spirit. Check out the catalog at summitreadyapparel.com and get ready for your next adventure. That's summitreadyapparel.com. Looking for your next great trail read? Walk Uphill is a powerful story about leaving the emptiness of modern corporate life behind and finding a completely new beginning on the Appalachian Trail. It's about discovering what life can look like when you embrace freedom, lighten your load, and take it step by relentless step. I actually read this book myself during a couple rest days in Gorham, New Hampshire, right after conquering the brutal terrain of southern Maine. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover in 2 days. The book chronicles the real-life events of the author, Bounce the Hiker, in a twisty, shocking, edge-of-your-seat story that even the most imaginative fiction writer couldn't make up. Just a quick content warning, there is definitely adult material in this book, so I wouldn't recommend buying it for your 10-year-old's birthday. But if you're looking for a gripping, raw trail adventure, I highly recommend Walk Uphill by Bounce the Hiker. You can find it easily on Amazon by searching Walk Uphill Book, or just click the direct link in the show notes of this episode. A new high mileage day on the AT. That might seem kind of silly to say since this is really only our second hiking day, but I thought it would be fun as I'm going through this to track that. This record would stand throughout the wilderness, and when surpassed on June 22nd, would then stand until August 4th. Of course, I'll mention it again when we get to those episodes. And eventually, we hit the record for the hike, so no more after that. In any case, we were in for a pretty easy day. Trash Panda from the AT Hostel in Millinocket had called the hike from Katahdin Stream Campground to the southern border of Baxter the easiest 10 miles in Maine. And looking back now, I'd have to say he's pretty accurate about that. Naturally, I didn't have the frame of reference for it back then. That was an absolutely beautiful day. Really, most of the trek through the wilderness ended up being, I don't remember the really hot days hitting until just the other side of Munson. Fording streams was a lot of fun. We'd learned about it before, but now we got to do it. As we progressed through the 100, we were in a bit of a drought, so fording streams would actually get progressively easier as we went. But the first number of streams, especially those couple in Baxter State Park, were really just a nice new aspect adding to the sense of adventure. After the 100, there didn't really seem to be quite as many streams for the rest of Maine, and fording streams is really kind of a Maine thing. As you progress further along the trail, you hit a lot more bridges, or like clear stepping stones or obvious rock hops. Here is where I really appreciated that my camp shoes were really river shoes, and I would kind of change those, especially early on. I'd kind of change those and go across in the river shoes. Abel's store was fun too, so this was a great day overall. So Abel's store was great. Haley and I were both looking forward to a sub, though. We had actually skipped lunch to have lunch at the store. We'd read about the store, we knew it was coming up, and we'd done that. If I recall correctly, they were slotted to go full service in another week. So we had just been a little bit too early for the subs. We were still really early in the season, as I'd kind of mentioned before. But the ice cream was great. And actually, you really can't beat ice cream in Maine. I don't know what it is they're doing, but ice cream in Maine is awesome. Ice cream on trail is just kind of awesome. There were a lot of stops where I would get some ice cream, and I'm not a big ice cream eater in what I would call my normal life, but had a lot of ice cream on trail. It was at the Abel store that we met the older ranger that I believe was the lead ranger for Baxter State Park. Can't remember his name. It was something simple like Ranger Tim or something like that, but you can't hold me to that. I alluded to this a couple of episodes back as sort of a funny story. It's not really that funny, actually. It's not even really much of a story. But the ranger was sitting on a rock outside Abel's store and was waiting for us. And as we walked up, asked us by name if that was us, right? And that was, needless to say, unexpected. What had happened there was Carrie had gotten worried and called into Baxter State Park to check on us. And we had been offline for a couple of days, and also there had been the recent news and everything. So it wasn't crazy for her to have a little bit of worry. And so this was kind of good because she was able to get at least one day earlier than she otherwise would have been that update on our well-being, right? So Baxter State Park got back in touch with her and said they saw us entering the wilderness. And so, what brought that on is that we'd been out of cell phone reception the whole time we were in Baxter, and the last communication that Carrie had from us was the morning of June 4th. The dynamic in the 100 would be that you basically get service over a certain elevation, and there's no service at all in Baxter, right? So it would often be a day or two before we had opportunities to check in. Okay, now to make some introductions. At this point in the hike, who is it that's with us, right? So first, let me say that even though we were generally unbothered by the, again, quote unquote, outside world, that we is actually decently broad. So strangely, even though we're in this wilderness, there is a bit of a social experience. So who's there? First, of course, Haley and me, but then also Dan and Michaela, at this point in the journey, generally stopped at pretty much everywhere we stopped through the first half of the wilderness. After food drop, we would actually lose them and then reunite with them in Munson. Next up would be the 3 people that we met at Herd Brook Lean-To on the night of June 7th, so basically last episode. The one I want to mention the most here is Daddy Longlegs, because she'll become a recurring character in this story. Haley and I will run into her in Munson, and then I will run into her again just south of Shenandoah in Virginia at a hiker party that was an awesome time, and I look forward to talking about that one when we get there. On the night of the 7th, Daddy Longlegs was simply a ball of energy. I remember her kind of basically dancing and jumping and kind of whooping around near the fire ring and just super excited. Now for us thru hikers, excitement, especially as southbound thru hikers, excitement would be running high anyway. I mean, we were just beginning something totally awesome, right? But I feel like I can almost look back at Daddy Longlegs on that night as just an awesome personification of that excitement. She would go on to make it all the way to Springer and finish. And she traveled at least half of the trail, I want to say, with a group of hikers that we'll end up following as this story unfolds, because they were a little ahead of my Slobo group, and we had a lot of friendships between the 2 groups. And as we're getting around to this episode, and you're hearing this, the Trail Days episode will not have been too far in the past. And what was really cool is that whole trail family was present at Trail Days. So you may remember a few names here. Frogger, Pastor Frank, Big Pimpin', Nature Boy, Eddie Machete. Those would be the people that ultimately finished with Daddy Longlegs right before Thanksgiving. It was really awesome to catch up with all of them and hung out with them quite a bit over that weekend just a couple weeks ago. Joining us in the shelter that night was one hiker other than Haley and me, and this was a guy by the name of John. He had been section hiking the AT for 20 years northbound, so was just about to finish an epic 2-decade journey. I'd meet a few people like that along the way, and I have a huge respect for those folks who come out year after year to get a chunk of the miles and then ultimately finish the AT. And then lastly, in that group of 3, there was a lady going by the trail name of Meanderthal, grouping together a couple of different ideas there. First, the ME was on purpose because she was in Maine, and then kind of meander because she intended to go very slow. Her goal was to do the 100-mile wilderness in 20 days, going only 5 miles a day. I never really found out if she made it, but I talked to others who met her, including Ratatouille, so she at least made it a significant part of the way. Next, I'd like to intro Fernando. We would end up meeting Fernando the next day, June 8th, at a water source, just effectively just kind of sharing the water source. And then we'd finish that day, June 8th, with him at Rainbow Spring Campsite. Fernando's a great guy, retired doctor from the town of Adams, Massachusetts. And later on in the hike, I would visit Fernando and stay at his home for a night, which was just a wonderful little respite from being in the woods. And also just a restful and invigorating visit. Fernando's home was really like a peaceful sanctuary, and it was really cool just to kind of even meet some of his friends, and the hospitality of Fernando and especially his wife Jen was just phenomenal. So I look forward to when we get to talk about that here as the story progresses. Here in the 100, what's really kind of fun is that Fernando and Haley were like buddies. Well, and really Fernando was a buddy to both of us, but there was something, I don't know, something special about the bond between Fernando and Haley, and that was really cool. Fernando also organized and led a project where he and a number of people that he was working with would procure medical equipment and send that down to his native Guatemala, which was really cool. And he showed me pictures of the significant shipments that he was sending down there. And then the other 4 folks that we really met in this first segment of the 100-mile wilderness would be Chaps, Caveman, Dunk, and Sunshine. Funny thing here is that I actually ran into them on the morning of this day, the morning of June 7th, as I was leaving Baxter State Park. I went into the ranger's station to check out with Corey, just so he knew we were leaving the park as planned. And the Appalachian Trail Hostel had dropped off their next group of folks who were getting ready to go up Katahdin. Corey was receiving the weather report, and we all had to kind of wait for that to finish up before we could conduct our various business with him. And Bubbles from the AT Hostel, she was there, and she actually asked them if they knew the lightning position, and I demonstrated that for them. So it was kind of my first introduction to these guys, although no introduction by name or anything like that at that point. We would do that a couple days in the future from where we are, out on June 11th. Chaps was a journalist who had been living in the D.C. area. He's out in California now, post-trail, and I think he was originally from the New England area, or maybe he just went to college there. One thing that was pretty cool was that when I visited Fernando, Then I got Chaps' number as well, and we had kind of kept up through the rest of the through hike from there, and have a couple times post-trail as well. I believe Chaps is probably listening. Caveman and Dunk I really didn't come in contact with at all post-Munson. But one thing that was kind of fun was Sunshine, who was Caveman's father. We had gotten kind of close, especially as my stay in Munson kind of extended. And one of the things that I did past Munson, at least whenever I could find one, so I would take a picture of the entries in the shelter logs from Caveman and Dunk, and I would send those to Sunshine. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. Sunshine was actually done at Munson. He had to go back to work, but he had gotten to experience Katahdin and the wilderness with Caveman and Dunk. As I mentioned, Caveman was his son, and Dunk was a friend of theirs. But now here, just a week or two ago, I caught up with Sunshine, and he is now going to pick up at Munson and continue on south. And his plan is to section hike the AT from now Munson all the way down to Springer, and to complete his section hike before retiring, and then right after retiring, through hike it northbound. So he will have gone both directions. And that does a pretty good job of introducing everybody who was in the wilderness with us, at least up until food drop. We meet a couple more people on the backside of the 100, but we'll go ahead and mention those guys later as they become a little bit more present to the narrative. This is something that I'm going to continue to try and do, so we can kind of, with every new segment, kind of introduce the cast of characters. And even if somebody's just kind of continuing with us, you still get a sense of who is around as the hike continues. And with that, that'll just about wrap it up for this episode. Join us next time as we continue to tackle the 100-mile wilderness and enjoy this very unique paradise. Until then, this has been Muse. You have been listening to Muse's AT Podcast. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.